Blood trickled at my hairline as my mother's words rang in my ears. Maybe if your mother listened like Quinn does, she wouldn't get punished. Punished? The word hung in the air of my small duplex living room. My daughter's scream pierced through the ringing in my ears. Her face, terror frozen in those 8-year-old eyes, reflected everything I had spent years trying to protect her from. My father's fingers still dug into my arm where he had shoved me into the bookshelf. My mother's palm print burned across my cheek. The family photos on the wall, the ones where we all pretended to be normal, now seemed to mock me as I watched my daughter trembling in the corner, witnessing her mother injured on the floor of her own home. All because I wouldn't pay my sister's rent. Again. My name is Nora, I'm 34 and a single mother. This is the story of how I became the landlord of my own life, and theirs. I lived modestly in a rented duplex with my daughter, Sophie. Everything I did for her. School lunches, clothes, dance classes. She was quiet and thoughtful, always watching. And now she was watching my parents assault me because I had finally said no. It had started small. My parents would say things like, "Quinn's struggling. Help her out a little." And I did. First with tuition, then car repairs, then just until she gets back on her feet. But my younger sister never stood on her own, and my parents never stopped asking. They had my address and phone number from when I'd invited them to Sophie's birthday party last year, despite my better judgment. The text had arrived earlier that day. "Rent is due. Help your sister out. We raised you better than this." I had ignored it. Sophie's dental procedure had drained my extra funds, and I couldn't afford to bail Quinn out again. 2 hours later, they showed up. No warning. Mom banging on the door like a debt collector, Dad standing behind with that smug look he wore when preparing to lecture me. "Why aren't you answering our messages?" Mom had snapped as I opened the door. "I've already told you, I can't pay Quinn's rent this month." "Oh, so your daughter's dentist bill is more important than your sister's roof," Dad said sarcastically, stepping inside without being invited. "I'm not responsible for her lifestyle," I said, standing my ground. "She had options. She chose not to work. Don't put that on me." That's when things escalated. Mom threw her purse across the room, screaming, "Ungrateful brat, you think you're better than us now?" Before I could process it, she slapped me hard. Dad grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the wall. I stumbled, hitting the corner of the bookshelf. And now, here I was, blood dripping onto the hardwood floor, while my parents sat on my couch like they owned the place. "We'll leave when you transfer the money," Dad barked. "Until then, we'll stay and make sure you don't waste any more of it." My daughter's eyes never left mine as I slowly stood, legs shaking beneath me. Something in me cracked, then shifted, like tectonic plates realigning after centuries of pressure. "Mom," Sophie whispered later that night, curled against me in our locked bedroom, "why do Grandma and Grandpa hate you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't find words to explain the twisted version of family I'd accepted for so long, but as I watched her finally drift into restless sleep, my mind clicked through possibilities like a combination lock finally aligning. The next morning, I drove Sophie to school with sunglasses covering my swollen eye. Then I drove straight to the courthouse. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that for the past 2 years, I had been quietly investing every spare dollar from my steady IT job. Every raise, bonus, and freelance gig went into a fund that had quietly purchased the very house my parents lived in. My childhood home, a foreclosure, bought through an LLC I'd established with the help of a financial advisor who specialized in real estate investments. They knew nothing about my involvement. If they wanted to remind me what family meant, I was about to redefine it on my terms. The bruises on my arms and the fresh medical report were enough to push through an emergency restraining order. "They hurt me in front of my daughter because I wouldn't pay for my sister's rent," I told the officer. He didn't even blink. "You did the right thing. Let us handle the rest." Next, I reached out to the property manager of my childhood home. I had her contact information saved in my phone from when I'd first purchased the property. "Are they behind on rent again?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the monthly reports she sent. 3 months, she replied. We were about to send them a notice. "Don't," I said. "Let me." That night, my parents had the audacity to text me. Dad, you've embarrassed this family. Mom, Sophie needs to learn who the real villains are. Dad, you'll regret choosing outsiders over your own sister. They didn't know I had already sent a certified letter with a 30-day eviction notice. They didn't know what was coming next, but Quinn did. A few days later, I bumped into her at the grocery store near my office. She looked at me like I was dirt. "You're still playing the victim?" she scoffed, tossing expensive hair products into her cart. "You mean the victim of your freeloading?" I said calmly. "I'm not playing anything. You're about to watch the stage crumble beneath your spotlight." She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. Some people only learn by falling. The eviction letter arrived at my parents' house the next morning. Mom called me, screaming through the phone. "How could you do this to us?" When I answered without emotion. "The same way you could hit your daughter in front of her child. Easy." "Where are we supposed to go?" she cried. "That's your problem," I said. "But if you need help, maybe Quinn can pay your rent." There was silence on the other end. Then she hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next week was chaos. My parents contacted mutual relatives, painting me as cruel, ungrateful, mentally unstable. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to defend myself. Instead, I picked Sophie up from school with a calm heart and told her, "We're moving." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Where?" "To a place that's truly ours." I had closed on a small house a few streets over. Nothing fancy, but it had a fenced yard, Sophie's favorite lavender bushes in front, and peace. Real peace. I'd been saving for this down payment separately from the investment fund, knowing I'd need a fresh start for both of us. Meanwhile, my parents were frantically trying to find housing with Quinn, who, according to my cousin, who still spoke to them, was now too busy to help. Poetic. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt healed. But the final confrontation was still to come. Exactly 30 days from the date on the eviction notice, I stood across the street from the house I once called home. The property manager had confirmed they were still there that morning and would need to be out by noon. The front yard was cluttered with plastic bags, half-broken furniture, and my mother's prized patio swing, now rusted at the base. My father paced like a caged animal. Quinn wasn't there. According to my cousin's text from that morning, she had flown to Miami to clear her head. I crossed the street slowly, Sophie holding my hand, her tiny fingers squeezing mine tighter the closer we got. She had a backpack over her shoulder with her sketch pad sticking out. I hadn't planned for her to witness this, but she asked to come. She said, "I want to see what it looks like when people get what they deserve." The moment they saw me, my mother rushed forward. "Nora, you can't be serious," she snapped, dragging a suitcase behind her. "We're your family. You're throwing us out like garbage." I looked at her without flinching. "I was garbage to you when I needed protection. When Sophie needed protection, you hit me like I was nothing. And now you want sympathy?" My dad stomped toward us. "You think money gives you power? You've become arrogant. You're just a tenant who bought herself a crown." "No," I said. "I became the landlord of my own life, and yours." He reached for my arm, but this time I didn't freeze. I didn't cower. "Touch me again," I said sharply, "and the police will arrive faster than your next lie." He stopped. Something in his eyes shifted. Maybe for the first time, he realized he couldn't scare me anymore. Sophie stepped slightly forward. "You shouldn't have hurt my mom," she said, voice quiet but clear. "You lied about love." My mom's lip trembled, but she didn't apologize. She never did. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," I said. "I regretted letting you stay this long." They stood there, two people stripped of control, their pride scattered in the driveway. They had always held power over me through guilt, silence, and fear. But today, the roles reversed, and it felt like breathing for the first time. I turned to Sophie. "Let's go." We walked back toward our car, not looking back. Later that evening, I poured us both tea, hers chamomile, mine green. She sat across from me at the new kitchen table in our tiny home. The lavender bushes outside caught the golden hour light, swaying like they'd been waiting for us. "Do you feel better now?" Sophie asked, legs swinging under the chair. I thought for a moment. "I feel clean," I said, like something heavy was washed away. She nodded like she understood. I had started therapy. Sophie had started painting. We were slowly rebuilding not just a home, but a self-worth that had been stolen, splintered, and mocked. A few weeks later, I got a message from a distant cousin. My parents were now staying in a one-bedroom apartment above a closed nail salon. Quinn had ghosted them, leaving nothing but an angry voicemail and a drained Venmo account. No one was rushing to save them. They had burned every bridge. I never replied. Instead, I posted a picture of Sophie holding her latest painting, a small house with 2 stick figures and the sun smiling overhead. The caption read, "Period. We don't live in fear anymore." And we didn't. Sophie's father had left before she was born, and I had finalized the full termination of his parental rights years ago when he showed no interest in being part of her life. It was just the 2 of us now, and that was more than enough. As for my parents and Quinn, I heard through mutual friends that they eventually moved to a smaller town 3 hours away. My father found work as a night security guard, and my mother cleaned houses, the very thing she used to mock me for doing to pay my way through college. Quinn apparently found someone new to fund her lifestyle. I wish them nothing, neither good nor bad. They simply didn't exist in our world anymore. Sometimes Sophie asks about them, and I tell her the truth. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who chooses to love you right. 6 months after the eviction, the final paperwork arrived. The divorce from my old life was complete. I sold my parents' house, invested the money, and finally changed our last name. We weren't running anymore. We were standing, firmly planted in a life we had chosen. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.